Personal Notes. Jarminquillar, Galdar High Council. Cycle 10-847-229, Post-Integration. Classification: Private Analysis, not for Council Archive. The human delegation departed 3 cycles ago. I have spent the time since reviewing every moment of their visit, every interaction, every data point. I admit I started admiring them as much as I fear them. On their own, humanity is a fascinating species. Their evolutionary history shows they descended from persistence hunters, omnivores who could survive on plant matter, but invested enormous effort in hunting megafauna, prey that even apex predators avoided. And their preferred hunting methods? Persistence hunting and ambush. Both required group investment, coordination, and effort. Both high risk, high reward. These are not merely learned behaviors. These are evolved traits. Patience, cunning, and group coordination are written into their biology. Their evolution was shaped by extreme selection pressure for group survival. Individuals who prioritized group survival over personal interest outreproduced those who did not. This continued long past the point where survival on their planet was assured. The drive for group survival, now abstracted beyond simple existence to include ideological, cultural, economic survival, is genetic. Not learned, genetic. Humans maintain multiple factions in constant conflict, but the definition of group is fluid. It expands and contracts based on threat level. I still remember when Chen shared one of their sayings. Me against my brother and I against our cousin, our family against the village, our village against outsiders. The pattern scales infinitely, from the family unit to the whole species, and at the species level, when the entire species perceives existential threat, all internal conflict gets suspended instantly and completely. Throughout their history, humans engaged in proxy wars, political manipulation, and the orchestration of conflicts between third parties to serve their interests. They have practiced this not for mere centuries, but for millennia, honing these skills against each other, always striving to stay a step ahead of equally capable actors. For them, adapt or die evolved into outsmart and overpower, or become obsolete. They refine these techniques precisely because their doctrine of mutually assured destruction made direct conflict between major factions suicidal. When you cannot fight openly, you learn to fight through others. They became masters of it. And even more unnerving is their understanding of game theory. Humans possess mathematical sophistication to a level unheard for a species so young. They understand deterrence, signaling, commitment mechanisms, separating equilibria, and focal points at levels approaching our own. The more I thought about it, the more I got convinced that everything they did was deliberate. Every moment of their visit was calculated. Every action was planned. Every word was chosen. Every response was anticipated. They didn't merely ignore the gate network, they dismissed it. They did not stumble into revealing their unity. They did not accidentally show us their capacity. They did not spontaneously decide to give us historical texts about power dynamics. El Harada got it completely wrong, along with the rest of the council. There was nothing spontaneous, nothing instinctive in their behavior. It was choreography. It was performance. It was theatrics designed to lead us to specific conclusions, without us being any the wiser. And we, ancient, wise, supposedly unmanipulable, watched the performance without even realizing that it was a performance, and drew exactly the conclusions they wanted us to draw. We invited humans to study them. They accepted our invitation to use us as a vehicle to deliver a warning to the rest of the galaxy. Realization number 1. Not using the gate network was a message on its own. Every species in this galaxy depends on the network. Travel, trade, communication, all require it. The network is infrastructure of galactic civilization. Attacking the network would be attacking civilization itself. Humans arrived without it. They demonstrated wordlessly that they do not need what everyone else needs. They could survive if the network collapsed, that they could continue expanding while every other civilization regressed to isolated systems. This was not convenience or preference, this was strategic demonstration. We are not dependent. We are not vulnerable through infrastructure. We do not need what you need. The implications are staggering. If conflict escalates to a point where humans calculate that galactic civilization itself is a threat, they could shut down the gate network and watch everyone else collapse while they continue expanding independently. They don't need to burn the galaxy. They can simply suffocate it. They did not say this. They did not threaten it. They simply arrived without using the network and let us calculate the implications ourselves. Realization number 2. Diplomats do not lose composure. The 2.3 second moment of synchronized response to Ur-Lukam's insult was presented as loss of composure. Momentary reaction to being called primitive. But these were diplomats. You do not become a diplomat if you cannot control your reactions. You do not represent your faction in first contact with the first ones if you lack emotional discipline. You do not get selected for this mission if you are prone to being thrown out of balance by insults. These were not random humans. These were carefully selected representatives who had trained their entire careers to maintain composure under observation. And they all lost composure in perfect synchronization. Same head tilt, same eye focus, same duration. Then perfect resumption of previous behavior. This was not loss of control. This was performance. They showed us the unity mechanism. They let us see what happens when the switch flips. They maintained it for exactly long enough to be noticed by observers, as sophisticated as Galdar. Then they turned it off and returned to factional arguing. They were showing us the early warning sign. This is what it looks like when we perceive existential threat. This moment right here. This synchronization. When you see this, you are about to be destroyed. This is your only warning. They demonstrated it in safe context. Mere insult, not actual threat, so that when it appears in dangerous context, we will recognize it. And they did it so subtly that it appeared spontaneous, instinctive. It appeared to be revelation of something they could not control. But this was a message. Deliberate, calculated, and executed with precision. Realization number 3. The Threat Assessment Protocol. When humans perceive species-level existential threat, they respond with genocide. Without hesitation, without mercy, and without proportionality. But, and this is crucial, only when the threat is external to their species. Humans fight each other constantly and violently. Their factional conflicts have killed millions throughout their history, but they never go for the existential throat. They maintain MAD equilibrium. They have agreed, collectively and probably unconsciously, that species survival trumps factional victory. This means their genocidal capacity is not generally bloodthirstiness. It is targeted response to specific calculation. External threat to species equals elimination of threat by any means necessary. The boundary is clear, the mechanism is understood, and the response is proven through demonstration. This is not moral failing, this is strategic doctrine, and they wanted us to know it. Realization number 4. Method selection based on strategic calculation. Jazin could not be manipulated in time. They were straightforward military aggressors requiring direct response. Result: stellar annihilation. Fast, immediate, and overwhelming. But humans understood that destroying the civilization is insufficient if survivors might eventually seek revenge. So they rebuilt the Jazin. Strategically. They integrated Jazin survivors into human economic systems, creating dependency. And then they addressed a structural vulnerability in Jazin society. Females, though equally intelligent, have been systematically subjugated by males. With Jazin male-dominant structures destroyed, humans simply treated Jazin females as equals. The calculation is ruthless in its elegance. Jazin gender ratio. 9 females to 1 male. Within 1 generation, 90% of Jars in society will consist of females, who experience not genocide but liberation from millennia of subjugation. They will remember humans not as the species that nearly annihilated them, but as the ones who freed them from their own males. Even if Jarzin rebuilt their civilization to its former glory, revenge becomes impossible. The population that would lead such an effort sees the old Jarzin order as oppression, not a golden age. Humans didn't just defeat the Jarzin, they ensured the next generation would be grateful for that defeat. The old ways died with the old stars, and humans made certain no one would mourn either. The Darnaks were different. Stronger and smarter, but more complex, psychologically. Humans realized they could be turned against themselves without the internal restraints humans maintain in their own conflicts. Result, orchestrated internal collapse. Slow and patient, but equally destructive. Then humans rebuilt them, strategically. They positioned themselves as essential mediators between Darnak factions, as neutral arbiters, as the circuit breakers preventing the cycle from repeating. Throughout Reconstruction, one message was reinforced, constantly. You nearly destroyed yourselves. We are why you still exist. We are the safeguard. The psychology is surgical in this position. The Darnaks will not remember humans as the ones who gave them the tools of self-annihilation. They won't even realize it. They will remember humans as the ones who stopped the genocide, not the ones who manipulatively initiated it. Human presence will become associated with stability, not destruction, with recovery, not collapse. Within 1 generation, the Darnak factions will accept human mediation as necessary. They will believe they need humans to maintain peace amongst themselves, that without human oversight they would return to the self-destructive cycle. This demonstrates something terrifying. Humans do not have one response. They have a toolkit. They assess the opponent, identify optimal methods of destruction, and execute without moral constraint. If you cannot be manipulated, you will be destroyed directly. If you can be manipulated, you will be destroyed through proxies. If neither method serves their purpose, they will find a third option. The lesson was not new to them. They had been practicing this for 4,500 years, and not as abstract strategy, but as survival necessity. They refined proxy warfare because their MAD doctrine made direct warfare suicidal. They became masters of orchestrated destruction because they needed to fight without fighting. And now, they have brought those millennia-refined skills to the galaxy. Realization number 5. On the nature of power. Among the documents they shared with us, one in particular stood apart. It was ancient by their standards, more than 4,500 years old, and the way they drew our attention to it was almost playful. They didn't insist, they nudged us toward it. The title read simply, On the Nature of Power. Athens confronting Melos. The Athenians explaining that justice is irrelevant when power is unequal. Melos was destroyed because it believed it could appeal to morality and fairness. Athens acted not out of cruelty, but as deterrence. Allowing Melos to exist without submission would have been an existential threat to the Athenian order, and so Melos was erased. The message could not have been clearer. We understand how power works. We mastered it throughout all our history, and we had to make sure that you understand our modus operandi. Realization number 6. We are the message delivery system. The final piece clicks into place. They came here to turn us into their warning broadcast system. They could not spread warnings themselves. Threats signal weakness. Direct communication of "we are dangerous, fear us" invites testing. It creates adversarial dynamics. It potentially triggers coalition formation against them. But if the Galdar, ancient, neutral, wise observers with no stake in human success, if we warn others about human capabilities, that carries weight no human statement could match. They understood this, they calculated it, and then they executed it. They demonstrated their capabilities twice. Jazin, Dynax, using different methods. They showed us their unity mechanism. They gave us historical texts explaining their strategic thinking. They provided evolutionary context for why they operate this way. And then they left. No threats or demands. No explicit requests that we warn anyone because they knew we would. Because we are compelled by our own analysis. Because the mathematics demands that we warn species away from triggering genocidal response. Because we would prefer civilizations to learn through observation, rather than become the next demonstration case. They manipulated us, not out of malice, but because they knew the weight of responsibility we carry as the last of the first ones. They used our desire to prevent a galaxy-wide catastrophe. They didn't try to justify themselves, because they know. They know. Power is the perception of potency. It lies wherever one believes it lies. And so they came and used our very perception to ensure that the galaxy will hear their message. If anyone threatens humanity, they will not be the Melians, they will be the Athenians, the ones who erased them.